All right, welcome to the Fox Law Group podcast. We're excited to be here today. We've got a wonderful guest, Dr. Roger Reed of the Las Vegas Foot and Ankle Center. One thing fun about practicing law is we get to meet a lot of interesting people, and we consider you one of those people. So, Dr. Reed, is that okay if I call you Dr. Reed?
Sure, that's fine.
Sure. How did you, first, what do you do?
I'm a podiatrist, foot and ankle surgeon here in Las Vegas.
So what's the difference between a podiatrist and it's like a MD, I guess? Or are you an MD?
No, podiatry is a DPM degree. It's similar to dentistry, where the day we start school, we know what we're going to be when we finish. So it's a separate degree. It has the same type of we do surgery on foot and ankle. We can prescribe medications, hospital privileges, all those kinds of things. Right. Just a specialty license.
Right. So it's specific starting out. You know you're going to focus on.
Yeah, the real difference, I guess, is maybe the third year instead of we did the first 2 years. The school I went to, the first 2 years, we sat in the same class as everybody else that went on to become emergency room docs and those kinds of things. But at year 3, then we really focused specifically on the lower extremity. Right. And then our residency and internships are specifically lower extremity. We do rotations through hospitals and things, at least back when I did. I've been at this 25 years, so it's changed a little since I was in school. Right. Yeah, I've had some friends that have gone that way, and they seem to like it. It's a good profession. Yeah. So when did you start out? Well, I went to school, started school in 1984, which seems like forever ago now. So I graduated in 88. And I went to school in Iowa, which at the time was a new podiatry school. Most of the schools back then had been freestanding, and at that time there was a couple that had started becoming a part of medical school. So you would go to medical school, and then this would be a program like the physical therapists or the MBA programs, whatever. But it was podiatry, and then the allopaths and DOs were there. So right. Actually, the school I went to was the osteopathic school in Des Moines. So cool. Good experience. Yeah. Did you like Iowa? I did. I loved Iowa. Was it too flat? No. Well, I grew up in Idaho, so for me, I don't know that I could go back there now, but 30 below winter was nothing then. It was like from Idaho to there. It was nice thing. It was nice and green in the summertime. Right. So we liked that part. Yeah, definitely. So you finished in 88. Finished in 88. From there, I went to Loma Linda, California, did what they called an externship there for a year. And through that externship, I did rotations through different departments, emergency room, did radiology, anesthesia, orthopedics twice. And then I got my residency at the same hospital, so I stayed there for an additional year. Basically did some of those same things again. And then after that, ended up coming to Las Vegas. What brought you to Las Vegas? My wife. Oh, she's from here. Well, they moved here when she was in high school. Mm-hmm. So she graduated from Valley, did her last year there, senior year. And then as it happened, my father-in-law had a distant relative, a cousin, I guess, who was a podiatrist here in town, and called him up at the time and said, hey, I've got a son-in-law who's graduating and looking for a place to go, and want to know if you had any openings. At the time, I was kind of looking to maybe go back to Idaho. Right. I had some ins in the Boise area. But the economy back in the late 80s was not as good there. I mean, it was fantastic in Las Vegas in the 80s and really through the 90s. So it was a good opportunity, and ended up coming here and really enjoyed that part. That's great. It took me a while to get used to the heat of the desert, but now, if I go up there in the summertime and it's 70 degrees, I think I'm freezing to death. So. Yeah. I grew up here. I still don't know if I'm used to the heat. It's just so hot. As long as you're here for the springtime when it comes in, then you're okay. Yeah, that's the beautiful part of the year, spring and fall. Yeah, spring lasts forever. Yeah. So you started at your father-in-law's relative's practice. Yeah, Carl Smith, the good guy. He's still in practice here. I think he's trying to retire this year. Back then, he had a partner named Ken Smoots that was a good guy. He's retired now, still lives here in town, but. Mm-hmm. They're kind of getting to the point where they want to retire. I remember when I first started, I thought, those guys were the old guys. Now everybody looks at me and I'm the old guy. So no! It all rotates through. So. Right. Yeah. Young guy that's with me now, Dr. Tilton, is very well trained. Those guys now, they go through a lot more than we. They had a minimum of a 3-year residency, and they do a lot more surgical training, and
wow,
it's just very intensive. It's really almost like an orthopedic, because they specifically have trained for almost 7 straight years just on lower extremities.
right.
So there's really nothing that that those guys from Dr. Tilton can't do as far as lower extremity surgery. Sometimes just because you can isn't the reason to do it, and
Right.
you have to be tempered as far as that. But he's a good guy. That back in the day, I was the young guy that was the surgeon that knew all the new things. So
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
yeah, I don't mind being that guy now.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how those cycles work out. So at some point you branched out on your own? Did you buy a practice, or how did you do that?
Well, when I started with Dr. Smith and Smoots, that was Eastern Avenue Podiatry back in about 1989 is when I started with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a satellite office out in Henderson. They had the one in Las Vegas, and they gave me the opportunity to buy the Henderson office from them. And I did. That was in 1991. And at the time, it was just kind of a part-time practice, and I was out there, twiddling my thumbs a lot. And so there was a lot of other things I did. I had a clinic. I ran out in Pahrump for a while and did some other stuff. And as it got busier over time, then it became full-time. And eventually, I moved down to the hospital. I had an office in the old St. Rose Well, I shouldn't say old, because it's still there, but Boulder Highway in Lake Mead. And I was there for about 9 years. They built a new hospital at St. Rose and Eastern. That was about 2000, somewhere around there. And so we started an office over there. I had 2 offices for quite a while. And then I had the opportunity to move into my own office, a much bigger office on Horizon Ridge where we are now. We've been there about 13 years.
Oh, that's great.
A lot of space. So at that point, I actually hired a guy that was well known in podiatry, used to lecture, wrote textbooks, edited a lot of stuff. And he was with me for about 8 years. He retired. Another doctor at the time. There were 3 of us. That was before the big 2008 downturn that anyone in Las Vegas knows about. So, so we're down to 2 guys now, and we're looking maybe to expand over onto the west side now. We've had some discussions and thought about doing that. So
that's great.
Hopefully, if the economy keeps going,
good. Yeah, definitely. So, in running your own business, have you found that? Is that something? I imagine that's not something they train you for in podiatry school.
No, they don't.
It's not. No.
That's an interesting thing, because these, the naivete. When I first got in practice, when they sold me that practice out in Henderson, and I started out there, paying the utility bills, all the stuff that you go through, and then I kind of joke around now in the office that. Because there's so much responsibility you have with running the practice, and there's contracts, there's employees. The more employees, the bigger the headaches get there, and all that kind of stuff. But I joke sometimes that if these patients would quit showing up, I could get my work done, because the insurance anymore. I wonder, do I get paid really to file insurance claims, or do I get paid to see people? It seems like I do a full job of each one. So a lot of stuff goes on. Yeah. I wonder if some of these younger guys really, the trend now is not really so much to go into private practice. I think that the way medicine looks right now, 10 years from now, maybe there'll be very few people in private practice. It's going to be big groups, or you'll work for a big HMO or a big insurance company. And so the good news maybe for them is they don't have to worry about so much learning how to run a business or a practice that way, because they have a manager that does it for them. But that'd be nice to only have to worry about that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So you think the days of I don't want to call it small town, but the local doctor who, took care of your kids and took care of you, took care of your kids and your grandkids, you think that's on the way out? Or?
Well, I hope that the personal touch is not out, but I think the actual model of, having a guy where you go and it's just a single guy in the practice, maybe a couple of nurses, and going in and seeing him is probably, because the costs are just not, you can't do it anymore. And so you kind of have to group together just to get the lower cost in rent. I mean, you look at rent, employees, payroll, all those kinds of things, and being in a bigger group kind of defrays some of those, or at least combines them. So I think that's where it's going to head. I think part of this healthcare mandate that we're going through that kind of steers things that direction as well.
Right.
I think if doctors can make the conversion and still be able to kind of have that ethical, kind of the personal touch with patients, that's going to be a little bit harder to maintain if you just show up that day and you're handed a list of patients that you've never seen, and the next time they come, they're going to see the next guy. It's hard to do that, but that's kind of the way it is when you're a resident. You don't necessarily develop a rapport with patients because you don't ever see them in the long-term thing. So I'm afraid that's what it might go back to. Hope
Right.
not, but.
Yeah. So what do you enjoy most about your job then? I assume the paperwork out of it's not Saturdays.
I love Saturdays. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I hear you on that one.
I was joking with the patient this morning. I said, I go, today's Friday, right? And she's, yeah. It seems like every day is Friday. It's like I just keep waiting for the Saturdays. Podiatry is a great thing with people because a lot of stuff you do with patients in podiatry is you're able to actually make them feel better when they leave. A lot of times you go to the doctor, if you've got a sore back or neck or whatever, you get there and they'll write a prescription. You don't necessarily feel any better when you leave.
Right.
But a lot of times with what we do, if people come in, you can actually give them some relief from some of their problems while they're there, which is a nice thing. That's satisfying about it.
So what's a day like in the life of a podiatrist? What kinds of things are you seeing? What kinds of things are you doing?
A typical day would probably be, we see a lot of, I say the most common thing we probably see are people with heel pain. That's very common, heel spurs, what they call plantar fasciitis.
Right.
See, that morning pain when you first get out of bed and you're like, wow, what happened? And so ingrown toenails, you'll see a lot of those. I've been in practice quite a while. I used to do a lecture at the hospital for a lot of years for diabetics, so I have a lot of diabetic patients that come in that's more just routine care. The problem that the diabetics get into is that at some point they'll get a lot of numbness in their feet. And
right.
They can develop sores. They don't even know they have them. They'll come in and they've got this open sore on their foot, and those are very hard to kind of deal with, and infections and things that way. But sometimes my associate, Dr. Tilton, he sees even the young kids. I've never been a big fan of seeing the younger kids.
Right.
There's some special training, and he's had that to deal with them, and he likes to see them. So we see basically from kids clear up to the seniors. But that's kind of the average day. Sometimes we'll have surgical cases in the morning at the hospital. Dr. Tilton sometimes will have a whole day where he's doing surgery.
Wow.
Personally, for me, I've kind of gotten more to the point in my practice where if there's really the difficult cases, especially the rear foot stuff, he's had the training, I'll have him look at them and he can make suggestions. I do mostly forefoot surgery and bunions and those kinds of things now. So a little less as far as being out of the office, where a lot of these younger guys are spending a lot of time in the surgery centers or the hospitals doing cases.
Right. Interesting. Sounds like you see a variety of problems.
I do. I see more variety. He sees more of the stuff that is the surgical stuff. Sometimes wound care. He has an interest in wound care. Mm-hmm. I sometimes ask him why. Why do you want to?
Yeah.
Because they tend to be the more difficult patients.
Right.
And, some guys just don't want to deal with that. It's a lot of extra after-hours stuff, and you have to really be dedicated to want to see and treat that kind of thing.
Right. What drew you to that practice in the first place?
I have a cousin who's a podiatrist, and he was in La Jolla down in San Diego, and he said to me, this in the summer, I said, come down, I'll show you what podiatry is about. So I went down there, and we went to the Padre games, we went golfing, we went to the beach. I said, podiatry.
It's great.
Who wouldn't want to do this? So that's kind of where my interest. I actually thought about being a dentist for a while, and when I was in undergraduate college, we had to take a course for that. It was this intro into dentistry.
Oh, interesting.
And I remember getting that class, and the first day, the guy who taught the class was a dentist. It was after hours at 7 o'clock at night. And he comes in and he says, he said, raise your hand if you know what profession has the highest suicide rate.
Right.
We're all looking at each other like, this guy's, what's going on? He said, yeah, it's dentistry. So we had to go spend, I think it was 3 hours, 5 days in an actual practicing dentist's office. And I think after maybe 30 minutes the first day, I said, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Everything, back in those days, they were all hunched over. Everything was wet. They're in the mouth. It's like they're talking, they're biting fingers. I just thought, I can't do this. And at the same time, I was actually volunteering at a hospital in the ER. And so probably the first week, I think I met every orthopod. That was a clue right there that orthopedics be ready to come in on the weekends and nights. But right. I think I felt like I enjoyed that better. There was more variety. There was more interaction with the patient. And so between not wanting to do dentistry and my cousin saying, come down and see what podiatry is, and we're going to the beach, I thought, fantastic.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do. So.
Has it worked out that way for you?
No.
Not really?
No, but it hasn't been bad. I mean, I think medicine's changed a lot, but I think it was a good decision for me back then. It was either that or stay home on the farm in Idaho, and
right.
I didn't want to do that too bad.
No.
That was a lot harder work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's kind of crazy. In college, I went out with a girl for a while whose father was a beet farmer in Idaho. and she would tell me about that. And I visited the farm one time, and I just thought, boy, that's tough. One check a year.
That's right.
You know, and then you got to plan everything out. I'm just not that good. Not that good at.
I remember one time asking my dad when we were kids. We were out. It seemed like every time we did anything, had a shovel involved in it. We were out digging holes. We were out in the fields, and I said to my dad, I said, how come people that work so hard like this don't get paid the most? And he started laughing at me. It's like, it's not the people that work the hardest that get paid the most, you know. So that's when he said, go to school. You can always come back. And I thought, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't think any of his kids went back to the farm.
Yeah. Well, in the same sense, a lot of doctors aren't encouraging their kids to become doctors now for the same reason of the cost of medical schools and all the expenses that are involved and the time you spend for the potential of what you're going to deal with as far as government regulation down the road. There's a lot of people that don't encourage at least people who are doctors don't encourage their kids to be doctors.
Sure. Yeah, I remember when I was in college thinking about that as a potential area to pursue. Everybody that was a doctor told me, hey, don't do it. Don't do it.
That's why you're an attorney now.
That's why I'm an attorney now, and I wish somebody told me anyway. That's a different topic. But yeah. Sometimes, hindsight's always 20/20.
It is. Yeah.
But that's the way things are. You find where you are and you make the best of it, and try to find the things that you can enjoy about it. Like I was saying, one of the interesting things about being an attorney is that we meet a lot of people throughout, not necessarily every day. Most of the time we're just stuck behind a computer typing or reading, and that's most of it. But every once in a while you get to meet people. And just last week I met Kevin Costner's U.S. history teacher. So that was kind of interesting. But he said he was a medium student.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, he's done better than medium now.
Yeah, definitely. But he said he did a big unit on American Indians, and then Kevin Costner made Dances with Wolves, and he did another big unit on the JFK assassination, and then he made that movie JFK. So he says, I think I had something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe
I had something to do.
Some royalties there.
Yeah, exactly. But so things go different ways and make the best of it. Let's see. I had one more question I was going to ask you. It just slipped my mind. There you go. If you were going to give somebody advice going into podiatry, what advice would you give them?
It's funny. I actually get calls occasionally where people will actually ask me that. I was the past president of the Podiatry Association. I think probably all of us get calls like that occasionally. But from an educational standpoint, I think there's a lot of things that you probably have to do in undergraduate. The courses that really separate a lot of people are the chemistry, physics, histology, things like that. And some people will leave that. Honestly, to get into medical school, you don't necessarily have to have a degree in science. You just have to be able to do well on the entrance exams and have a degree. I've heard of people that have degrees in English and other things that go into medicine. So I think if you did that in undergraduate, you'd have a much stronger base, at least when you get in and then have to go through these classes. I heard it said once that going to medical school is like getting a drink out of a fire hydrant. It's just, seriously, it's just this explosion of information that you have to try to take in so quickly. And I remember the one course that really stuck out in my head is I took this histology class that I hated in undergraduate. It was really a hard class.
Right, yeah.
But I think that class saved me my first semester because there was so much you had to study. At least when I would come to that one thing, it was like, oh, at least I know this. I don't have to worry so much about it. So
yeah.
Some of those things can help a lot. But, yeah, I don't know. Everything, it doesn't really matter whether it's medicine or law or these other professional degrees. I think you really have to be able to kind of defer kind of your own personal, I shouldn't say necessarily enjoyment, but you really have to be dedicated to want to do these kinds of things.
Right.
Because, there's lots of times when I would be in school, you're 2 years into this, it's 11:30 at night, you've been studying, all day long, and, you call your friend on the phone that has a 4-year degree and he's graduated and he's got a boat and he's out fishing and you're like, man, I don't even see that on the horizon yet.
Right, yeah.
You've just got to be able to really stick to it. And if you can, I think that there are some rewards as far as your relationship with people, all those things. But if you're not really dedicated to it, whether it's law or any of these professional degrees, you just have to stick with it and have patience. Know that in the end it'll work out.
Right. Yeah.
for most people, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would caution them just to really look at the economy and to really see if it's something you want to do, because a lot of people that got into the profession for the money of it, which is diminishing daily, you really have to be dedicated maybe for other reasons.
Right. Is there something for you, or maybe a story for you, or a time you could think back where you had an experience with a patient or something, you thought, all that study and hard work was worth it? Does that happen for you very often? Or maybe not that dramatic? Or
Yeah, well, I joke with my wife that sometimes I'll come home and I'll say, well, I saved a life today. In some professions,
right,
people really do save lives every day.
That's true.
In podiatry, I guess for us, the good news is most of what we do is elective. I mean, you don't really have to do surgery on a lot of these things that are bunions and those kinds of things. There are problems related to infections that have to be addressed. Those are different altogether. But, making a diagnosis that's kind of obscure, that's always feels good, because 90% of the knowledge you gain in medical school, you only use about 10% of it on a daily basis. And so every once in a while, reaching in and picking one of those ones out that was the obscure thing, it feels good. But well, I'm not sure what he said.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the quality of life for people. And, as people get older, mobility is a huge thing for them. It's very sad when you see some of these older patients come in and they said, oh, I got my driver's license taken away. It's just taking away their wings.
Right.
And in a sense, the problems they have with their feet and being able to walk, all of us are going to get there, unfortunately, just some of the things that happen with aging. And, nobody gets out of it without having arthritis and pains and all these kinds of things. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Again, like I said earlier, on a daily basis, you can help a person actually feel better when they leave. And if you can give them back some mobility, that's a big thing for them.
Yeah. What, is there something that people like me who are younger, I'm still pretty young,
Yeah.
but people that are younger, is there something that we can do now or avoid doing now to avoid problems with our feet in the future?
I think the general things that all of us could do, exercise more, lose weight, all that kind of stuff would help. Shoes are a big deal. There's a lot of, sometimes you get these runners that come in that want to run barefoot. Never understood that. They made shoes because we humans made great strides forward in history, and now these guys want to run barefoot. I don't quite get it. It tears their feet up. But, wearing a good, sensible shoe, for the ladies, it's really hard sometimes to talk them into, getting out of those heels and wearing maybe a more conservative lower heel, more rounded shoe. And then the biggest problems that a lot of people have with diabetes, sometimes lifestyle, especially type 2 diabetes, is more of a kind of a lifestyle thing. And so those are simple things that you could do when you're younger that might help later.
Right. Yeah. Final thought. Any parting thoughts you'd like to share? Nuggets of wisdom that you've picked up along, maybe with running a business, handling HR issues.
Oh man, I don't know. The one thing that I have found over time is that the more you need a loan, the less chance you're going to get it from a bank. Right. When you have enough money that you don't really need the loan and you can use their money, they're happy to let you have it. I don't know. That's what I found in business anyway. But you just got to, have good ethics. I've always felt like this in practice. There are some guys, unfortunately, that they get in practice and they have all this debt from school, and so people come to them, and I think that they look at them almost, instead of the patient that's there for them to help and treat, they look like the patient is there to help them.
Right.
I had a guy in my office maybe 2 months ago that we were just talking, and he made a quote. He spoke this, and it just stunned me that he said this. He goes, he was a broker, and he was doing very well. And he says, I finally reached a place in my career where I can put my clients' needs ahead of my own. I just thought that's incredible that someone would say that. And if you're coming into this practice or medicine and you had that idea, you're never going to do very well. People feel it. They know that if that's the way you're going to treat them. And you really have to be interested in the patient, do what's in their best interest. That's the best thing I could say for business. I think for all business, whether it's podiatry or attorneys or any of the rest.
Right. Yeah. I think that's something that I think attorneys are famous for. Unfortunately, putting themselves first before the interests of their client. It's something that, it's a real problem, and it's something hard to face. And finding ethical attorneys can be tough. We try to do what we can. Best
you guys
be
do a
upfront.
good job.
Yeah. Thanks. We do what we can. But anyway, Dr. Reed, thanks for coming on. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you better. And
thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks for watching, anyone, and listening for all those people out there.